The heat shimmering off the Nevada hardpan was thick enough to chew. It was 104 degrees in the shade, and unfortunately for Jack Rivers, he was currently nowhere near the shade. He wiped a streak of grease across his forehead, leaving a black smear that mingled with the sweat, and cranked the wrench one last time. The solar array groaned, a rusted metallic complaint that echoed across the empty valley. But the alignment light finally flickered from angry red to a steady, sullen green. Jack sighed, dropping the wrench into his toolbox with a heavy clatter. He stood up, his spine cracking in 3 distinct places, and looked out at the horizon. There was nothing but scrub brush, red rocks, and the shimmering haze of heat for 50 miles in any direction. Just the way he liked it. He adjusted the waistband of his boxer shorts, blue with little yellow ducks on them, a gag gift from an ex-girlfriend he had never bothered to replace, and considered the merits of a cold beer versus a lukewarm shower. Then the sky split open. It was not a sound, it was a vibration, a hum that rattled his teeth and made the sand around his sandals dance like water on a hot griddle. Jack shielded his eyes. He expected a storm, or maybe a military jet from the base 200 miles west. But this was neither. A teardrop of silver light descended from the stratosphere. It moved with a physics-defying grace, ignoring wind resistance and gravity alike. It was silent, terrifyingly beautiful, and aiming directly for his backyard. Jack did not run. He did not panic. He simply sighed, picked up his wrench again, and muttered, "Well, there goes the property value." The craft settled onto the desert floor 50 yards from his porch, hovering inches above the ground so as not to disturb a single grain of sand. A ramp extended with a hiss of pressurized gas, misting the dry air with a scent that smelled like ozone and expensive perfume. Jack stood there, clad only in his duck-print boxers and worn-out leather sandals, holding a wrench like a club. He looked like a man who had given up on dignity years ago and was perfectly comfortable with the decision. A figure emerged from the mist. She was tall, perhaps 6 feet, and floated rather than walked. Her skin was a pale, luminescent violet that seemed to catch the brutal desert sun and refract it into something soft and lovely. She wore robes of a material that shifted color with her movement, flowing like liquid mercury, cinched at the waist with a belt of pulsing geometric light. Her hair was a cascade of silver strands that defied the wind, hanging perfectly straight. She stopped 10 feet from him. Her feet, encased in metallic boots that did not touch the dirt, hovered 6 inches in the air. She looked at him. She looked at the wrench. She looked at the boxers. Jack looked at her. He looked at the floating ship. He looked at her violet eyes, which were wide with a mixture of scientific curiosity and mild horror. "Greetings," she said. Her voice was melodic, synthesized through a translator collar at her throat that turned her alien vowels into perfect, clipped English. "I am Princess Virelia of the 3rd House of the Galactic Accord. I have been assigned to this sector for my senior thesis on primitive planetary cultures. You are the designated subject. Jack Rivers." Jack blinked. He scratched his chest with the hand holding the wrench. "You got the wrong house, lady," Jack said. "I ordered a pizza. Unless you got a pepperoni special in that silver frisbee, I think you took a wrong turn on Mars." Virelia tilted her head. The translator collar hummed softly. "Pizza. A circular nutritional disc. No. I am here to observe. The Galactic High Council has authorized a 6-week residency. My sensors indicated this dwelling was the most statistically average habitat for a solitary male of your caste." "Average?" Jack looked at his rusted trailer, the pile of scrap metal he called a garden, and the miles of empty wasteland. "I think your sensors need a tune-up. Look, Princess, I don't know what kind of reality TV prank this is, but I'm not interested. I have got a solar array to calibrate and a beer with my name on it. It is not a request, Varelia said, gliding forward. She passed him, moving toward his trailer. Your government signed the accords. Cooperation is mandatory, and do not worry. Human Jack, I shall be unobtrusive. Treat me as if I am not here. I am merely a shadow on the wall. She floated up the stairs of his porch and vanished inside his trailer. Jack stood alone in the heat. He looked down at his boxers. A shadow, he said to the empty desert. Right. The first 4 hours were a disaster of interstellar proportions. Varelia, despite her claim of being a shadow, was about as unobtrusive as a supernova in a closet. She hovered around the trailer, scanning everything with a handheld device that emitted a high-pitched whine which set Jack's teeth on edge. She scanned his toaster. She scanned his pile of dirty laundry. She spent 20 minutes analyzing a bottle of hot sauce, murmuring about chemical warfare agents. Jack, having decided that if he was going to be studied, he might as well be comfortable, had put on a pair of cargo shorts and a stained t-shirt. He was currently in the kitchen, a kitchenette the size of a closet, trying to make dinner. Subject is preparing sustenance, Varelia narrated to a floating orb that recorded her every word. She hovered in the doorway, her robes shimmering in the dim light of the trailer. The process involves thermal agitation of protein strands and vegetative matter. The odor is pungent. It's chilly, Jack said, stirring the pot, and it smells like heaven. You want some? Or do you guys just plug into a wall socket? I consume nutrient injectables, Varelia said, producing a silver tube. They are perfectly balanced for optimal physiological performance. Consuming biological matter is quaint, inefficient. Inefficient is my middle name, Jack said. He ladled a heap of chili into a bowl and grabbed a spoon. He moved to the small, wobbly table by the window and sat down. Take a load off, Princess. You're making me nervous hovering there like a majestic purple hummingbird. Varelia hesitated. She looked at the plastic chair opposite him. It had a crack in the seat. She lowered herself slowly, her anti-gravity belt adjusting so she hovered just a millimeter above the plastic. I wish to initiate a dialogue, she said, producing a holographic notepad. To establish a baseline for my research, I need to understand your hierarchy of needs. Jack blew on a spoonful of chili. Shoot. Varelia straightened her posture. She looked regal, ancient, and incredibly out of place next to a stack of old car magazines. Tell me, human, in your brief biological existence filled with struggle and inefficiency, what drives you? What is the pinnacle of your desire? She paused, her violet eyes locking onto his. What do you like most? Human. Jack stopped chewing. He looked at her. He looked at the serious set of her jaw, the way the light caught the silver in her hair, the sheer absurdity of an alien princess sitting in his trailer asking him about the meaning of life while he ate chili out of a chipped bowl. The urge to be profound flickered and died instantly. The urge to be Jack Rivers took over. He swallowed, wiped his mouth with a paper napkin, and looked her dead in the eye. Your butt, he said. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to stop. Varelia blinked. Her translator collar flashed red, then blue, trying to parse the context. My posterior gluteal muscles? Yep, Jack said, taking another spoonful. Top tier. Very nice. Varelia sat frozen. Her face, usually a cool mask of diplomatic detachment, went through a complex series of micro-expressions: shock, confusion, indignation. She looked down at herself, then back at him. That is highly inappropriate, she stammered. I am a diplomat, a scholar, a member of the royal house. You asked what I liked. Jack shrugged. I'm a simple man, princess. I see quality engineering. I appreciate it. It is not engineering, she snapped, her voice rising an octave. It is biology, and it is, she trailed off. A strange color rose in her cheeks, a darker shade of violet. She looked away, towards the window. It is adequate, I suppose. My genetic line is noted for its symmetry. Jack hid a grin behind his spoon. See? We are finding common ground already. Virelia cleared her throat, tapping furiously on her holographic pad. Subject displays primitive mating fixations and a lack of respect for authority, she muttered, loud enough for the recording orb to hear. But Jack noticed she didn't float away. And when she thought he wasn't looking, she shifted in her chair, straightening her posture just a little bit more. Living with an alien was less like science fiction and more like a sitcom written by a sadist. The bathroom situation was the first major hurdle. On the third day, Jack walked in to find Virelia standing in the shower stall, fully clothed in her robes, staring at the shower head with intense concentration. Jack said, stopping in the doorway. She turned. This hydration chamber, it is defective. I have been waiting for the sonic pulses to initiate for 10 minutes. It's water, princess, Jack said, reaching past her to turn the knob. Cold water blasted out. Virelia shrieked, a sound that was less royal decree and more startled cat, and leaped backward, levitating 3 feet into the air and banging her head on the ceiling. Liquid solvent, she gasped, wiping water from her face. You cleanse with liquid solvent? That is barbaric. It strips the essential oils from the dermis. It gets the grease off, Jack said, handing her a towel. And try to warn me next time. I almost dropped my toothbrush. Then there was the sleeping arrangement. Virelia refused to sleep on the suspiciously soft biological platform, the couch. Instead, she activated a stasis field in the middle of the living room. She slept floating upright, arms crossed over her chest like a vampire, glowing softly. The first night, Jack got up to use the bathroom, saw a glowing purple woman hovering in his living room, and nearly had a heart attack. Subject appears easily startled during nocturnal cycles. Virelia noted the next morning over breakfast. You look like a ghost haunting a disco, Jack grumbled, pouring black coffee. Can you turn down the glow? I need total darkness to achieve REM sleep. My bioluminescence is an indicator of health, she sniffed. But I shall attempt to dim. Despite the friction, Jack found himself watching her. Not just for the reason he had stated at dinner, though that remained true, but because of the way she processed the world. She was brilliant, clearly. She could calculate the trajectory of a falling star in her head and fix his toaster with a wave of her multi-tool. But she was also endearingly clueless. He watched her watch a butterfly. She spent an hour tracking it, her face soft, unguarded. It flies without propulsion, she whispered, awe in her voice. It is purely aerodynamic chaos, beautiful. It's a moth, Jack said, standing beside her on the porch. It eats my sweaters. It is free, she said, glancing at him. Jack felt a tug in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a haughty princess, but someone who had spent her entire life in a sterile, high-tech cage. Hey, he said. You want to see something really chaotic? She raised an eyebrow. He went inside and cranked up the ancient stereo system he kept wired to the trailer's speakers. The heavy thumping bass of an old funk track shook the floorboards. Virelia floated backward. Is this a weapon? A sonic deterrent? It's funk, Jack said. He started to move. It wasn't pretty. Jack Rivers danced like a mechanic who had had 3 beers, but it was enthusiastic. He snapped his fingers, shuffled his feet, and spun around. Come on. Loosen up the anti-grav belt. I do not dance, Virelia said stiffly. My caste performs only ceremonial rhythmic movements for the equinox. Boring, Jack said. He grabbed her hand. Her skin was cool, smooth as glass. She stiffened, her eyes going wide. Touch, he was learning, was not a casual thing for her people. Just feel the beat, Jack said, not letting go. 1, 2, 1, 2. Stop thinking about the math of it. Let your hips do the work. My hips are stationary structural supports, she argued, but she let him pull her closer. Slowly, awkwardly, she began to move. She mimicked him at first, her movements precise and robotic, but the rhythm was infectious. Jack spun her, and for a second, she forgot to levitate. Her boots hit the wooden floor with a solid thump. She laughed, a bright chiming sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it did him. Subject appears, unnecessarily charming when engaged in rhythmic activities. She whispered later that night into her recorder, hiding under the blanket she had finally accepted. She deleted the entry immediately, then stared at the ceiling, her heart beating in a rhythm that had nothing to do with the funk music. The second week brought the storm. It wasn't raining. In the high desert, the most dangerous storms were invisible until they hit you. A solar flare, massive and angry, ejected from the sun and slammed into the Earth's magnetic field. It happened at noon. The sky turned a sickly, electric green. The air tasted like copper. Inside the trailer, the lights flared blindingly bright and then popped. The hum of the refrigerator died. Jack's computer smoked, and Virelia fell. Her anti-gravity belt shorted out with a spark. She hit the floor hard, crying out in pain. Jack was at her side in a second. Virelia, you okay? She sat up, rubbing her hip. She looked terrified. My tech, it is offline. The ambient radiation, it is interfering with the power couplings. Solar flare, Jack said, looking out the window. The sun was a blurred, angry eye in the sky. Fried everything. We're going to be without power for a while. How long? Maybe a day, maybe 2. 48 hours tops. 48 hours? She looked around the darkening trailer. But the thermal regulation, the night cycle, it gets cold, Jack said grimly. Desert cold. Dropped to freezing tonight. He was right. By sunset, the heat of the day had vanished, sucked into the vacuum of the clear night sky. The trailer, usually a hot box, turned into an ice box. Without the electric heater, the thin aluminum walls offered no protection. Virelia was shivering. It was a violent, rattling shiver that shook her entire frame. Her violet skin had turned a dull, ashy gray. I cannot maintain core temperature, she stuttered, her teeth chattering. My species. We evolved on a tropical world. We rely on suits for thermal homeostasis. Jack had piled every blanket he owned onto the bed, but it wasn't enough. He looked at her, huddled in the corner of the mattress, looking small and fragile without her glowing aura. Look, Jack said, rubbing the back of his neck. This is going to sound like a bad pickup line, but it's survival physics. You're freezing. I'm a mammal with a high body temperature. We need to share the heat. Virelia looked at him. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated. In her culture, physical proximity was reserved for bonded mates or combat. But the cold was a knife in her bones. Proceed, she whispered. Jack lay down on the mattress and pulled the mountain of blankets over them. He hesitated, then pulled her towards him. She was stiff as a board, freezing cold to the touch. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her back against his chest, spooning her. "Just relax," he murmured. "I'm not going to try anything. I promise." "I know," she said, her voice barely audible. Slowly, the warmth of his body began to seep into hers. She stopped shivering. The tension left her frame. She melted back against him, fitting into the curve of his body as if she had been designed for it. It was quiet in the trailer. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. But under the blankets, it was a warm, secret world. Jack could smell her scent, ozone and wildflowers. He could feel the slow, steady beat of her heart, slightly faster than a human's. "Jack," she whispered. "Yeah? Is this common among humans? This proximity?" "With people you care about," he said. "Yeah. It's how we survive the dark." Virelia was silent for a long time. She shifted, her hand coming up to rest on his forearm, her fingers tracing the line of hair there. "It is efficient," she said softly. "Yeah," Jack breathed, his heart hammering against her ribs. "Efficient." They didn't sleep for a long time. They lay there, tangled together in the dark, acutely aware of every point of contact. Jack Rivers, the cynical engineer, felt a protectiveness swell in his chest that terrified him. And Virelia, the alien princess, felt the walls of her training, the walls that said humans were primitive, simple, inferior, crumbling down, brick by brick. She fell asleep eventually, her breathing deepening. Jack stayed awake, watching the strange green aurora of the solar flare dance through the window, wondering just how much trouble he was in. Virelia woke up alone. The power was back on. The hum of the refrigerator had returned. The sun was streaming through the window, bright and harsh. She sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest. The memory of the night before hit her like a physical blow, the warmth, the smell of him, the feeling of safety. She flushed, her skin glowing a bright, embarrassed pink. She scrambled out of bed, checking her robes. She composed herself, reactivating her gravity belt, and floated into the kitchen. Jack was there, fixing the coffee maker with a screwdriver. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, but he grinned when he saw her. "Morning, sunshine. Sleep well?" "Adequately," she said, her voice tighter than usual. She avoided his eyes. "The atmospheric disturbance has passed?" "Yeah, everything's back online." "Excellent." She floated toward her data pad. "I must log this event. The vulnerability of human infrastructure to stellar phenomena is a critical observation." She was retreating. Jack saw it instantly. She was putting the walls back up, layering the bricks with mortar made of scientific jargon. "Right," Jack said, the grin fading. "Just data." Virelia turned on her recorder. Entry 417. Subject demonstrated. Resourcefulness during a crisis. Survival was achieved through traditional thermal conservation methods. She paused. She looked at Jack, who had turned back to the coffee maker, his shoulders slumped. "Subject," she added, her voice dropping to a whisper the recorder barely caught, "has a heart rate that accelerates when in proximity to the observer. Observer notes a reciprocal physiological response." She switched off the pad. Her hand trembled. This was dangerous. She knew it. She was a princess of the third house. He was a mechanic on a backwater dirtball. There were laws. There were protocols. But last night, she had a dream. Royals did not dream. They were conditioned against it, trained to organize their subconscious during sleep cycles. But she had dreamed of sand and heat and a man with a wrench who looked at her not like a treaty obligation, but like a woman. She needed to focus. She needed to finish her report and leave. She activated the communication array on her ship remotely, intending to send a status update to her advisor. The screen flickered to life, but instead of the standard diplomatic frequency, a stream of raw code scrolled across the holographic display. Virelia frowned. She tapped a command. Decrypt. The code unraveled. It wasn't a message for her. It was a message about her. It was a shadow transmission piggybacking on her secure line. Subject VR, asset located and status contact established, phase 1 complete. Ensure emotional compromise. Do not retrieve until the genetic marker is confirmed. Virelia stared at the glowing text. The blood ran cold in her veins. Ensure emotional compromise. She wasn't randomly assigned. This wasn't a lottery. She looked at Jack. He was humming to himself, pouring 2 cups of coffee. He turned and held one out to her. Peace offering? He asked, a crooked smile on his face. Virelia looked at the coffee. She looked at the man who had held her through the freezing night. Jack, she said, her voice trembling. Yeah? She looked back at the screen, then deleted the message. Nothing, she said. She took the cup. Thank you. She took a sip. It was bitter, hot, and inefficient. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. The weeks that followed the solar flare settled into a rhythm that was as comfortable as it was dangerous. The high desert, previously a desolate expanse of heat and silence to Jack, had transformed into a canvas for the strangest road trip in human history. They spent their days in Jack's battered, dust-caked Jeep, bouncing over dried riverbeds and navigating canyons of red rock that looked like the bones of the earth exposed to the sun. Their mission was ostensibly scientific. Jack had a list of remote geological survey sites where the Galactic Accord had dropped seismic sensors. Glorified listening devices meant to monitor Earth's tectonic stability. Virelia's job was to extract the data. Jack's job was to make sure she didn't get bitten by a rattlesnake or wander off a cliff while admiring the strata. The dynamic inside the Jeep, however, had little to do with geology. Virelia sat in the passenger seat, her shimmering robes traded for a set of Jack's spare mechanics coveralls that she had tailored with a laser cutter to fit her tall, slender frame. She looked ridiculous and elegant all at once, a royal in grease-stained denim, her violet skin glowing softly against the worn upholstery. Explain the logic of this acoustic vibration again, Virelia said one afternoon, tapping the dashboard where the radio was blaring a classic rock anthem. It is not logic, V, Jack said, steering around a massive boulder with one hand. He had started calling her V 3 days ago, and she had stopped correcting him 2 days ago. It is adrenaline. It is about driving fast with the windows down. It is the feeling of being alive. Virelia frowned, analyzing the lyrics streaming from the speakers. The singer claims he is on a highway to an infernal afterlife. This seems like a suboptimal destination. Jack threw his head back and laughed, a sound that echoed off the canyon walls. It is a metaphor. It means he is having a good time doing bad things. Virelia looked at him. She watched the way the muscles in his forearms shifted as he gripped the wheel, the way the wind messed up his dark hair, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. She recorded a mental note, one she would never speak aloud. Subject displays increased bioluminescence of the spirit when moving at unsafe velocities. A good time doing bad things, she repeated, testing the words. Is that what we are doing, Jack Rivers? Jack looked over at her, his smile fading into something softer, more guarded. I don't know. Princess, you tell me. The tension between them was a physical thing now, heavier than the desert heat. It sat in the space between the seats, thick and electric. When they stopped for lunch, sitting on the tailgate of the Jeep eating sandwiches, their knees would brush, and neither would pull away. When she struggled with a heavy sensor coupling, he would step in, his chest pressing against her back as he reached around to leverage the bolt, and she would forget to breathe. They were playing a game, skirting the edge of a cliff, waiting to see who would fall first. The nights were worse, or perhaps they were better. Back at the trailer, the air conditioning humming a frantic battle against the lingering heat. Virelia had taken to consuming human media. She claimed it was for cultural context, a necessary component of her thesis. Jack suspected she just liked the drama. He introduced her to the golden age of Hollywood. Black and white films seemed to fascinate her the most. The lack of color forced her to focus on the faces, the raw emotion etched in light and shadow. One evening, they sat on the couch, Jack on one end, Virelia on the other, though the distance between them seemed to shrink by an inch every night, watching a film about a war-torn romance. Rain slicked the gray streets of the screen. A man in a trench coat looked at a woman with eyes full of desperate, doomed love. Virelia sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her violet eyes wide and reflecting the flicker of the television. She was completely motionless, her data pad forgotten on the floor. On screen, the lovers kissed. It was not a casual thing. It was a kiss of goodbye, a kiss that tried to say everything that words could not. Virelia made a small, choked sound. Jack looked over. A single tear, silver and viscous like mercury, rolled down her cheek. "Hey," Jack said softly. "It is just a movie. The actors are fine. They probably went to lunch right after that scene." Virelia shook her head, not looking away from the screen. "It is not the fiction that disturbs me. It is inefficient. They know they must part. They know the statistical probability of a successful union is 0, yet they remain. They damage themselves for a moment of connection." She turned to him then, her eyes searching his face. "Why, Jack, why is the pain worth the proximity?" Jack felt his throat go dry. The trailer suddenly felt very small. "Because," he said, his voice rough, "sometimes the math doesn't matter. Sometimes you just want to be with the person who sees you, even if it hurts, even if it's stupid." Virelia stared at him. The air crackled. She leaned forward, just an inch. "Have you felt this? This illogical pull?" Jack looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the alien geometry of her cheekbones, the impossible color of her eyes, the woman hiding beneath the princess. "Yeah," he whispered. "I think I am feeling it right now." Virelia flinched as if he had touched her. She scrambled back, breaking the moment with a clumsy retreat. "I require hydration," she said, her voice high and brittle. "The arid climate is depleting my reserves." She fled to the kitchen, leaving Jack alone on the couch with the black and white lovers and the ghost of a conversation that had terrified them both. 2 days later, the heat broke records. 110 degrees. The air was a convection oven. The Jeep's air conditioner surrendered 5 miles out of the outpost, blowing only hot dust into their faces. "I cannot function," Virelia gasped, fanning herself with a geological map. Her skin had lost its luster, turning a pale, chalky lavender. "My internal cooling systems are in critical failure. I need immersion, liquid cooling, immediately." "We are 50 miles from a pool," Jack said, wiping sweat from his eyes. "And that pool is a motel cesspool full of questionable bacteria." He thought for a second, scanning the horizon. "Wait. I know a place." He veered the jeep off the main track, bouncing over a ridge of sharp shale. They drove for 20 minutes into the deep solitude of the canyons until Jack stopped in front of a fissure in the rock face, a dark, jagged crack that breathed cool air. "Grab a flashlight," Jack said. They squeezed through the opening, descending a steep, rocky path. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 50 feet, down, until the path opened into a cavern the size of a cathedral. At the bottom lay a pool of water so clear it looked like glass. It was an underground spring, fed by aquifers deep beneath the desert floor. The light from their flashlights danced on the surface, throwing ripples of blue and white against the limestone ceiling. "Water," Virelia breathed. She didn't wait. She dropped her bag and walked straight toward the edge. She hesitated, looking at her coveralls. "Turn around," she ordered. Jack turned, facing the rock wall. He heard the rustle of denim, the soft thud of boots hitting stone. Then a splash. "Okay," she called out. Her voice echoed, bell-like and pure. Jack turned back. He had stripped down to his boxers. He wasn't shy, and the heat had killed his modesty miles ago. He waded in. The water was shockingly cold, a jolt that made him gasp. Virelia was floating in the center of the pool. She had removed the coveralls but kept on a thin, skin-tight undersuit she wore beneath them, a silvery, translucent fabric that clung to her like a second skin. In the water, her bioluminescence flared to life. She glowed with a soft, pulsating teal light, illuminating the water around her like a living lantern. "It is perfect," she said, spinning in a slow circle. "The mineral content is high. It feels heavy, grounding." "Don't go too deep," Jack warned, paddling out to her. "Currents can be tricky underneath." "I am a strong swimmer," she said. "My homeworld is 60% ocean." She dove, a streak of violet light under the surface, and resurfaced right next to him, shaking her hair. Water droplets flew like diamonds. They treaded water, facing each other. The cold of the spring and the heat of their bodies created a strange equilibrium. The playful energy of the road trip was gone, replaced by something primal. The cave, the dark water, the silence. It felt like they were the only two beings in the universe. "You are staring," Virelia whispered. She was close enough that he could count the silver flecks in her irises. "You are glowing," Jack replied. "It's kind of hard not to stare." "It is a reflex," she said, her voice dropping. She didn't back away this time. She drifted closer, the water pushing them together. Her legs brushed against his beneath the surface. "It signifies comfort, safety." Jack reached out. His hand broke the surface, water streaming from his fingers. He cupped her cheek. Her skin was cool and wet, slick as a dolphin's. Virelia's breath hitched. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. The glow under her skin intensified, pulsing in time with her heartbeat, a slow, rhythmic thrumming that lighted up the water around them. Jack moved closer. The water lapped at their chins. He tilted her head up. Her lips were parted, trembling slightly. "Jack," she breathed. It was a question and a plea. He leaned in. Their noses brushed. He could feel the heat radiating from her, a biological furnace waking up. Then she froze. Her eyes snapped open, filled with sudden, crushing panic. She shoved him back, hard. The force of it sent a wave of water splashing against the cave walls. "No," she gasped. "No. I cannot. This is treason." She scrambled backward, swimming frantically for the rocky shore. She hauled herself out of the water, shivering not from cold but from terror. She grabbed her coveralls, clutching them to her chest as if they were armor. Take me back, she said, her voice shaking. Please, take me back now. Jack stayed in the water, the waves of her retreat settling around him. The glow was gone, leaving the cave in shadows. He felt the cold seep into his bones. Okay, he said quietly to the dark. Okay. The drive back was silent. Virelia stared out the window, her arms wrapped around herself. That night, she didn't watch movies. She sat at her makeshift workstation in the corner of the trailer, furiously typing on her holographic interface. She needed to anchor herself. She needed to remember who she was. She was Princess Virelia. She was a scholar. She was a diplomat. She was not a woman who nearly kissed a primitive engineer in a cave. Log entry 550, she typed. Subject interaction has exceeded parameters. Objectivity is compromised. Recommendation, immediate extraction. She stared at the words. They felt like a lie. They felt like a betrayal. Am I observing him, she thought, her fingers hovering over the delete key. Or am I just looking for a reason to stay? She hit send on the report to her advisor, High Counselor Zarian. The holographic bar loaded, sending, sending. Then it turned red. Error, encryption mismatch. Virelia frowned. She tried again. Error. She accessed the diagnostic submenu. Her fingers flew across the light keys. The secure channel wasn't just down. It had been rerouted. Her messages weren't going to the High Council. They were being intercepted, scrubbed, and redirected to a ghost server in the Outer Rim. Someone had been editing her outgoing reports. Someone had been filtering her incoming orders. Jack, she said, her voice sharp. But Jack wasn't inside. Through the window, she saw him standing in the yard, near the solar array. He was holding a shovel, his posture tense. Virelia ran outside. The night air was still warm. Jack was staring up at the sky, then down at the sand. Jack, what is it? Quiet, he hissed. He pointed, hovering above the solar panels nearly invisible against the star field, was a small, dark object. It wasn't a ship. It was the size of a hawk, shaped like a teardrop, silent and sleek. It's been tracking us, Jack whispered. I heard the hum when we pulled in. I thought it was the inverter acting up, but it followed me when I walked the perimeter. A drone? Virelia moved closer, squinting. Yeah, but not one of ours. Ours are loud and clunky. This thing is... The drone dipped, a red eye scanning them. Jack didn't hesitate. He swung the shovel with the precision of a man who had spent a lifetime fixing things by hitting them. The flat of the metal blade connected with the drone in a deafening clang. The machine spiraled out of the air, sparking, and smashed into the dirt. Jack stood over it, breathing hard. That takes care of that. Virelia fell to her knees beside the wreckage. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and brushed the dust away from the drone's casing. There, etched into the black metal, was a symbol, a three-headed serpent eating its own tail. She stopped breathing. Jack, she whispered, we need to leave, now. What? Why? It's just a drone, and probably some military scout. It is not military, she snapped, looking up at him. Her face was a mask of pure horror. It is a royal inquisitor. These units are illegal. They are only deployed by the throne itself. They are used to hunt traitors within the bloodline. Jack dropped the shovel. Traitors? You said this was a school project, a thesis. Virelia stood up, backing away from him. The lie she had been living, the lie she had been fed, was unraveling. I thought it was but my family. They do not do random studies. They do not send princesses to live in trailers unless there is a purpose. She was hyperventilating, the corruption in the comms channel, the specific selection of Jack, the Inquisitor drone. "They are watching us," she said, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "They have been watching us the whole time. They wanted this. They wanted me to get close to you." Jack stepped forward, grabbing her shoulders to steady her. Who? Who wanted this? "Virelia, talk to me." "My father," she screamed, tears exploding from her eyes. "The Emperor. He does not care about culture. He cares about leverage. I am not a student. Jack, I am bait, and you are the trap." She tried to pull away, but Jack held tight. The revelation hung in the air between them. "Bait for what?" Jack demanded, shaking her slightly. "What do I have that an emperor wants?" "I don't know," she sobbed. "But I lied to you. I told you I was observing you, but I was using you, and now I have ruined everything because I couldn't just stay cold. I couldn't just be a princess. Virelia, stop." "I am a monster," she cried, the guilt of her heritage crashing down on her. "I am a tool of a fascist regime, and I have dragged you into—" Jack kissed her. He didn't think about it. He didn't calculate the odds. He just knew that the only way to stop the panic, the only way to bridge the galaxy of lies between them, was this. He pulled her hard against him, one hand tangling in her silver hair, the other gripping her waist. He kissed her with all the fear and frustration and desire that had been building for weeks. For a second, she froze. Then she shattered. She made a sound low in her throat and threw her arms around his neck. She kissed him back with a ferocity that staggered him. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. It was the collision of two worlds that had been trying to avoid impact and finally failed. And she glowed. It wasn't the soft shimmer of the pool. It was a supernova. A blinding flash of violet light erupted from her skin, so bright it cast long, sharp shadows across the desert floor. It turned the night into day for 50 yards in every direction. The energy hummed against Jack's skin, static electricity making his hair stand on end. He felt her heat, her light, pouring into him. They broke apart, gasping for air, but didn't let go. They stood there, foreheads resting against each other, bathed in the fading pulses of her light. "Jack," she whispered, her voice broken. "I know," he said. He ran a thumb over her cheekbone. "I know." "We cannot do this," she said, even as she leaned into his hand. "If they see this, if the drone transmitted this—" "Let them look," Jack said fiercely. "I don't care about your dad. I don't care about the throne. You are not bait, V. You're you." She looked at him, her eyes wide and shining. For the first time, the regal mask was completely gone. There was just a girl, scared and in love, standing in the dirt. "I am in trouble," she said softly. "We both are," Jack said. He pulled her in again, slower this time, a confirmation, a promise. The next morning, the air in the trailer was heavy. They moved around each other carefully like two people who had just defused a bomb and weren't sure if the timer had actually stopped. There was no retreat to subject and observer now. The lines were erased. Jack made coffee. Virelia sat at the table, staring at the black casing of the destroyed drone. "If that unit was transmitting in real time," she said, her voice hollow. "They have the data. They have emotional biometrics. They know my bond to you exceeds professional parameters." "So what happens?" Jack asked, leaning against the counter. "They fire you? Ground you?" "They recall me," she said, "and they erase you." Jack paused, the coffee mug halfway to his mouth. "Erase? Like memory wipe?" Virelia didn't answer. She didn't have to. Suddenly, the sky outside screamed. It was a sonic boom, followed by a pressure wave that rattled the trailer's windows in their frames. Jack dropped the mug. It shattered. "They are here," Virelia whispered. A holographic projection beamed directly into the center of the room, bypassing all of Jack's equipment. It was a rotating crest, a three-headed golden serpent. A voice, synthetic and booming, filled the small space. "High Princess Virelia of the Third House. Your mission is terminated effective immediately. You are in violation of the non-interference protocols. A transport vessel has been dispatched to your coordinates." The text scrolled beneath the crest in jagged alien script, then translated into English. "Retrieval in 72 hours. But it wasn't the countdown that made Jack's blood freeze. It was the file attached to the warrant. Beneath the crest, displayed in high-resolution red holographic wireframe, was a rotating DNA helix, and next to it, an Earth identification card. Target acquired. Rivers. Jack. Classification priority asset. Royal consort designate. Unauthorized. Jack stared at his own face floating in the middle of his living room. "Priority asset?" Jack asked, his voice unnervingly calm. "Consort designate?" Virelia stood up. She was pale, her light dimmed to almost nothing. She looked at the hologram, then at Jack. The pieces were falling into place, the surveillance, the setup, the testing of the bond. "They didn't just want to see if I would fall for a human," she whispered, horror dawning in her eyes. "They wanted to see if I would fall for you." "Why me?" "I don't know," she said, grabbing his arm. Her grip was bruising. "But if they designated you a consort, and you are unauthorized—" "Jack, when that ship lands in 3 days, they aren't coming to arrest us." She looked at the destroyed drone, then at the desert outside. "They are coming to harvest you." Jack looked at the countdown. 71 hours, 59 minutes. He looked at the woman who had glowed in his arms fast at night. He looked at the wrench on the table. "Well," Jack said, picking up the keys to the Jeep, "I guess we aren't waiting for them to ring the doorbell." The silence in the trailer was worse than the sonic boom had been. For the last hour, ever since the holographic countdown had begun its silent, terrifying tick downward, Virelia had ceased to be the woman who danced in the kitchen or swam in the underground spring. She had molted. The shimmering, violet-skinned alien who had laughed at his jokes was gone, replaced by the High Princess of the Third House, a creature of ice and marble. She moved through the small living space with terrifying efficiency, packing items into a sleek silver case. Her movements were precise, rigid, and utterly devoid of the warmth that had defined the last few weeks. She would not look at him. She would not speak to him. She was preparing to leave, but more than that, she was preparing to be erased. Jack watched her from the kitchen counter, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the laminate. He had thrown a bag together, water, rations, the kinetic pistol he kept in the safe, but he couldn't move past the wall she had erected. "Virelia," he said. "Do not address me by that designation," she said. Her voice clipped and cold. She picked up the datapad, wiped its memory with a single thumb stroke, and crushed the chip. "You are to remain here. When the transport arrives, you will submit to the neuroscan. It will be painless. You will forget the last 6 weeks. You will return to your life as a solitary engineer." Jack felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed her wrist. Her skin was cool, her pulse hammering against his thumb like a trapped bird. "Stop it," he said, his voice low. "Drop the act. V. You don't get to kiss me like that, glow like a supernova, and then tell me to wait for a brain wipe." She tried to pull away, her face set in a mask of imperious disdain. It was a biological error, a momentary lapse in judgment due to atmospheric radiation. "Unhand me." "Subject." Subject? Jack let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. Is that what we are doing now? We are back to the lab report? He tightened his grip slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to anchor her. Look at me. Look at me and tell me that what happened in the cave was an error. Virelia stiffened. She stared at his chest, refusing to meet his eyes. It does not matter what it was. It matters what it will cost. Then tell me the cost, Jack demanded. You said I was a priority asset. You said I was a consort designate. Why? I'm just a guy who fixes solar panels in the middle of nowhere. What the hell does your emperor want with my DNA? She finally looked up. The mask cracked. Beneath the icy royalty, her eyes were swimming with terror. Because you are not just a guy, Jack, she whispered, the fight draining out of her. You are a genetic echo, a ghost. She pulled her arm free and slumped onto the edge of the couch, the fight leaving her posture. She looked small suddenly, burdened by the weight of galaxies. Thousands of years ago, she began, her voice trembling. Before the Accord, before the Empire, there was a race known as the Scion. They were the architects of the first neural networks. They did not need technology to speak. They could bridge minds across light years. They were powerful, too powerful. Jack frowned, leaning against the wall. And they're gone? My ancestors hunted them, Virelia said, her voice thick with shame. We feared them. We destroyed their worlds. But before they vanished, they seeded their genetic code into primitive species across the rim. Dormant, hidden, waiting for a catalyst. She looked at him, her gaze tracing the line of his jaw. You are a carrier, Jack, a direct descendant of a Scion hybrid. It is why you could feel me in the storm. It is why you can sense drones. That is why... She faltered, looking away. It is why I glow when I touch you. My biology is reacting to the ancient power in your blood. It is trying to synchronize. Jack stared at his hands. They looked the same, scarred, calloused, covered in grease. So I'm part psychic alien? You are a living weapon, she corrected. And a political nightmare. Under galactic law, Article 7-9, any member of the royal house who bonds with a Scion descendant cannot be removed from power. The bond is considered sacred, unbreakable. If we were to consummate this union, if we were to complete the bond in body and spirit, then what? Then you become my consort, she said softly. Legally, irrevocably. You would share my rank, my authority. And because the Scion blood is involved, you would have the power to influence the entire psychic network of the Empire. You could command armies. You could topple the throne. Jack blinked. He processed the information slowly, the absurdity of it warring with the deadly seriousness on her face. So, Jack said, a slow, crooked grin spreading across his face despite the tension. What you are saying is, I am too sexy for intergalactic law? Virelia stared at him. For a second, she looked like she might strangle him. Then, a short, hysterical laugh escaped her lips. You are an idiot. You are an absolute, catastrophic idiot. Maybe, Jack said, dropping the grin and kneeling in front of her. He took her hands. But I am your idiot. And I am not letting them wipe my brain just because your dad is afraid of a little competition. It is not just my father, she said, gripping his fingers. The High Court does not want a consort. They want a specimen. If they take you before the bond is sealed, they will dissect you to isolate the gene. They will kill you. Jack. The gravity of it settled in the room. This wasn't a romance. It was a death sentence. Okay, Jack said, standing up. Then we leave. We go off-grid. I know places in the mountains where signals don't reach. We can— No, she cut him off. They have orbital scanners. They will find thermal signatures. Jack moved to his desk, hammering on the keyboard of his comms array. I'll signal Earth Command. Get the military involved. If this is a diplomatic mission gone wrong, they have to intervene. Static roared from the speakers. The screen was a wall of digital noise. They are jamming everything, Jack muttered. Local frequencies, satellite uplinks. We are in a bubble. Jack, Virelia said, her voice changing pitch. She was looking out the window. Listen. Jack paused. He heard it. A low thrumming vibration that wasn't the wind. It was the sound of heavy propulsion engines fighting gravity. He ran to the window. A ship was descending. But it wasn't the sleek silver teardrop of the diplomatic corps. This was a jagged black wedge of a vessel, bristling with weapon mounts. It didn't land gently. It slammed into the desert floor 300 yards out, kicking up a massive plume of red dust. That is not the extraction team, Virelia whispered, backing away from the window. That is a Razor-class interdictor. It is a rogue unit. Mercenaries on the royal payroll. Enforcers? Cleaners, she said grimly. They are not here to retrieve me. They are here to bury the evidence. The ramp of the black ship dropped. 6 figures in heavy matte black armor emerged. They carried rifles that glowed with menacing red plasma. They are here to kill us both, Jack said. He grabbed his bag and the kinetic pistol. Time to go. The jeep is too slow, Virelia said, panic rising. They will catch us in 2 miles. We aren't taking the jeep, Jack said. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back door of the trailer. Remember that geological survey site in the Box Canyon? The one with the automated scout skiff? The drone skiff? Virelia's eyes widened. Jack, that is a surveyor. It has a maximum speed of 40 miles per hour and no shielding. It floats, Jack said, kicking the back door open. And it doesn't leave tire tracks. Move! They burst out of the trailer into the heat of the afternoon. The sound of the armored soldiers shouting in a guttural alien language drifted on the wind. A red bolt of plasma hissed through the air, vaporizing the cactus next to the porch. Run! Jack yelled. They sprinted toward the ridgeline. Jack didn't look back as a second bolt slammed into the side of his trailer, blowing a hole through the aluminum siding where they had eaten dinner just last night. They scrambled up the rocks, lungs burning in the dry heat. The scout skiff was parked at the remote monitoring station a half-mile away, a flat, hovering platform used for carrying equipment over rough terrain. They reached it just as the roar of the black ship's engines flared again. The ship was lifting off, beginning to sweep the area. Jack vaulted onto the skiff and ripped open the control panel. Hot wiring alien tech, he muttered, twisting 2 crystalline wires together. Hope this works like a Chevy. The skiff hummed to life, wobbling unsteadily. Virelia jumped on behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Go! She screamed. Jack slammed the throttle forward. The skiff lurched, scraping the top of a boulder, and then shot forward. It wasn't fast, but it could fly over the jagged ravines that would have stopped a car. They wove through the labyrinth of slot canyons, keeping low, hugging the shadows of the red walls. Above them, the dark shape of the hunter ship prowled, its scanners sweeping the desert floor. They are tracking our thermal signature, Virelia yelled over the wind. We need to go underground. The springs, Jack shouted back. The cave system goes back for miles. He banked the skiff hard, diving into a deep fissure in the earth. He killed the engines mid-air, letting momentum carry them into the darkness of the cave mouth. The skiff skidded to a halt on the rocky floor, scraping sparks against the stone. Silence fell, heavy and sudden. Outside, the roar of the ship passed overhead, then faded into the distance. They were alive. Jack helped Virelia off the skiff. Her legs gave out the moment her boots touched the ground, and he caught her, lowering her gently to the sandy floor of the cavern. It was cooler here, deep in the earth. The air smelled of damp stone and ancient dust. Jack clicked on a glow rod from his bag, casting a soft, chemical blue light over the cave walls. Virelia was shaking. It wasn't cold this time. It was the adrenaline crash, the terror of the hunt. She pulled her knees to her chest, rocking slightly. "They will find us," she whispered. "They have seismic sensors. Once they realize we are not on the surface, they will start collapsing the tunnels." "We have time," Jack said, sitting beside her. He uncapped a canteen and handed it to her. "Drink. You're glowing again." A faint, erratic pulse of violet light shimmered under her skin, like a dying light bulb. She took the water, her hands trembling so hard she spilled some down her chin. "I am sorry," she said, wiping her mouth. "I am so sorry, Jack. I dragged you into this. I was arrogant. I thought I could control it." "Hey," Jack said, shifting so he was facing her. "None of that. We are in this together." "You do not understand," she said, her voice breaking. She looked at him, her eyes swimming with tears that shone like diamonds in the blue light. "You think you are saving a princess. You think there is some noble bloodline worth protecting." She took a shuddering breath. "I am not a daughter, Jack. I am a copy." Jack froze. "What?" "I am a clone," she confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "The third house has not produced a viable biological heir in 400 years. The bloodline is decayed. I was grown in a tank on the orbital ring, designed for intellect, for diplomacy, for aesthetics. My memories of childhood, implants. My parents, handlers." She looked down at her hands, as if they were foreign objects. "That is why they sent me. That is why I am expendable. If I fail, they will just decant another Virelia. They will upload my mission logs to her, patch the errors, and try again. I am not real. Jack, I am just hardware." Jack stared at her. He saw the shame that had been eating at her, the deep, hollow loneliness of believing she was nothing more than a product. He reached out and took her face in his hands. He forced her to look at him. "Stop," he said firmly. "It is the truth." She sobbed. "It is biology," Jack said. "I don't give a damn about biology. You think being born makes you real? I know plenty of people born the old-fashioned way who don't have half the soul you do." He wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You laughed at my bad jokes," he said softly. "You cried at that black and white movie. You saved me from that solar storm. You think a tank gave you that? You think a computer program decided to kiss me in the desert?" Virelia searched his face, looking for any sign of disgust, any sign that he saw her as a monster. She saw only fierce, stubborn affection. "But I am a copy," she whispered. "You are Virelia," Jack said, "and you are the only one of you I have ever met. You are real to me. That is all that matters." She let out a broken sound, half laugh, half sob, and collapsed against him. Jack wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight against his chest. He rocked her slowly while she cried, letting her release the lifetime of pressure she had been carrying. Slowly, the shaking stopped. The frantic pulse of her light steadied, growing warmer, deeper. She pulled back just enough to look at him. The blue light of the glow rod mixed with the violet radiance of her skin, creating a twilight world around them. "Jack," she said. Her voice was steady now, determined. "Yeah?" "The bond," she said. "The law. If we are bonded, if we are truly united. They cannot erase you without destroying the Scion connection. It would kill me to sever it. And they cannot kill me if I am a bonded royal. It creates a legal paradox. Jack looked at her. He understood what she was asking. He also understood that this wasn't just a legal maneuver. Is that the only reason? He asked. Virelia reached up, tracing the line of his lips with her finger. No, she whispered. I want to be real. I want to be yours. The air in the cave seemed to thicken, charged with the static of the storm outside and the energy between them. Jack leaned in. This wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss of the night before. This was slow, deliberate. He kissed her brow, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. You are already real, he murmured against her skin. When he finally kissed her lips, the world fell away. It was unlike anything Jack had ever experienced. As they came together, the physical sensation was drowned out by something vast and overwhelming. He didn't just feel her skin, he felt her mind. He felt the cool, crystalline structure of her thoughts. He felt the fear she had carried, the loneliness of the tank, the wonder she had felt watching the moth. He felt her love for him, a bright, terrifyingly massive thing that eclipsed everything else. And she felt him. He knew she could feel his grit, his stubbornness, the way he had protected his heart for years, and the way he had completely, utterly opened it for her. Her skin began to glow, not with a flash, but with a steady, blinding radiance. It filled the cave. The ancient DNA in Jack's blood woke up, roaring to life, reaching out to meet her energy. They weren't just two bodies in the dirt anymore. They were a circuit closing, a loop completing. It was slow, tender, and terrifyingly intimate. Every touch sent ripples through the psychic field they were creating. When they finally lay still, tangled together under the heavy blankets Jack had dragged from his pack, the cave was humming. The stones themselves seemed to vibrate. Virelia lay with her head on his chest, her glow soft and golden now, like the aftermath of a sunrise. She looked exhausted but peaceful in a way he had never seen her. Jack ran his hand down the curve of her spine, marveling at the fact that they were both still in one piece. So, he whispered, his voice raspy, that was different. Virelia chuckled, a low, sleepy sound. The Scion resonance, it amplifies sensory input by a factor of 10. Good to know, Jack said, kissing the top of her head. I'll put that in the review. He looked at her, tracing the silver patterns of her hair. Hey, V. I have a question. She lifted her head, resting her chin on his chest. Her eyes were heavy, violet pools of affection. What do you like most? Human, she asked, beating him to it. A playful smile tugged at her lips. Is it still my posterior gluteal muscles? Jack laughed, a soft sound that echoed in the quiet cave. He looked at her face, the alien angles he had come to memorize, the vulnerability she had shown him, the strength she had found in his arms. No, he said gently. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still on the list. But, he brushed a strand of hair from her face. It's the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching, he said. Like I'm the only thing in the universe that makes sense to you. Virelia's smile faltered, softening into something profound. You are, she whispered. You are the only thing that makes sense. A sharp beep cut through the moment. They both froze. Jack reached for his bag. A small red light was blinking on the side of the stolen skiff's console. What is that? Jack asked. Virelia sat up, the sheet falling away from her glowing shoulders. She stared at the console. It is the extraction beacon, she said, her voice tightening. The stolen skiff, it has a failsafe. When I activated the engine override, it triggered a silent alarm. It just synced with the orbital grid. They know where we are? They have a 10-kilometer radius, she said, scanning the readout. They are triangulating. We have 10 hours before they narrow it down to this cave. 10 hours. The peace of the last hour evaporated. The reality of the gunships, the clones, and the Empire crashed back in. Jack sat up and pulled on his shirt. He looked at Varelia. She wasn't panicking this time. She was sitting straight, her spine steel, her eyes burning with a new fire. I am not going back, she said. I am not going back to the tank. I am not going back to being a puppet. And I'm not letting them turn me into a lab rat, Jack said, pulling on his boots. We cannot fight a Razor-class ship, Varelia said, and we cannot hide on Earth. They will burn the planet to find us. Then we don't hide on Earth, Jack said. He looked at her. You said the Scion blood gives me access to the network, the ancient systems. Yes, there is a rumor, Jack said, his mind racing. Old desert legend, a singing tower buried out in the Badlands. The government looked for it for years but never found it. But if I have the DNA, maybe I can find it. Varelia's eyes widened. An ancient relay? If it is active, we could use it to jump, not just across the planet, across the sector. Where? Away, she said, out of the Accord, to the wild space. She reached out and took his hand. Her grip was iron. I love you, Jack Rivers, she said. It was the first time she had said it. It hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Jack squeezed her hand back. I love you too. V. Now let's get the hell off my planet. He grabbed the kinetic pistol. 10 hours, Jack said. Let's make them count. The stolen scout skiff whined in protest, its anti-gravity drive sputtering as it skimmed over the jagged floor of the subterranean tunnel. They had been moving for 3 hours, descending deeper into the crust of the earth than Jack Rivers had ever been. The air down here was thick, heavy with the smell of sulfur and stale time. Battery is at 8%, Jack shouted over the grinding noise of the engine. He wiped a smear of grease and red dust from his forehead. We are running on fumes. V. If this singing tower is a myth, we are going to be walking back up to a firing squad. Varelia sat behind him, her arms wrapped tight around his waist. Her bioluminescence had dimmed to a faint, nervous pulse, casting flickering shadows on the limestone walls that rushed past them. She was consulting the data pad she had salvaged from her wrist comp, checking the faint energy signatures bleeding through the rock. It is not a myth, she said, though her voice carried a tremor of doubt. The Scion energy resonance is increasing. It is faint, like a heartbeat buried under concrete, but it is there. Turn left at the next fissure. Jack banked the skiff hard. The left tunnel was narrower, a throat of black rock that seemed to swallow the light of their single headlamp. The temperature spiked. They were getting close to the mantle, or something that generated heat like it. The tunnel opened up abruptly into a cavern so vast the skiff's light didn't hit the ceiling. Whoa, Jack breathed, killing the throttle. The skiff drifted to a halt, in the center of the cavern, rising from a lake of magma that bubbled sluggishly 50 feet below the ledge. Was a spire. It did not look like the sleek, silver metal of the Galactic Accord ships. It looked like it had grown. It was made of a matte, obsidian-like material, spiraled and twisted like a massive drill bit aimed at the surface. It pulsed with a low, rhythmic thrum that Jack didn't just hear. He felt it in his teeth. The relay, Varelia whispered, sliding off the skiff. She stumbled slightly, her legs stiff from the ride. My father's archives listed it as destroyed. They said they glassed this site 3,000 years ago. Looks pretty intact to me, Jack said, checking the charge on his kinetic pistol. And active. They walked across a natural stone bridge that spanned the magma, approaching the base of the tower. Up close, the surface of the structure wasn't smooth. It was etched with millions of microscopic lines, a language so dense it looked like texture. "How do we turn it on?" Jack asked. "I don't see a power button." Virelia looked at him. The violet light in her eyes was intense, reflecting the magma glow below. "It is science technology, Jack. It does not run on fusion cells. It runs on biology. It runs on you." She took his hand and guided it toward a depression in the obsidian surface, a handprint that looked disturbingly human, though slightly larger, with elongated fingers. "This is going to hurt," she warned softly. "Story of my life," Jack muttered. He pressed his hand into the stone. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a sharp, biting pain shot through his palm, like 100 needles piercing his skin. Jack yelled, trying to pull back, but the stone held him fast. "Hold on," Virelia cried, gripping his forearm. "It is reading your genetic sequence. It is authenticating the lineage." A blast of white light exploded from the tower, blinding them both. The low thrum escalated into a roar that shook dust from the invisible ceiling high above. The pain in Jack's hand vanished, replaced by a rush of cold, electric energy that surged up his arm and slammed into his chest. He gasped, falling backward as the tower released him. Virelia caught him, lowering him to the stone bridge. Jack, breathe. I'm okay," he wheezed, clutching his chest. "Just felt like I stuck a fork in a fusion reactor." Above them, the air shimmered. The white light coalesced, forming a massive holographic sphere that filled the cavern. It wasn't a static image, it was a library. Millions of data streams swirled around them, images of planets, star charts, and biological diagrams floated in the air. Virelia stood up, walking into the projection. She reached out, touching a stream of data. Her face went slack with shock. "By the stars," she whispered. "It is all here. The true history." "Give me the cliff notes," Jack said, struggling to his feet. "The science," she said, her voice trembling as she read the ancient alien script. "They were not monsters. They were gardeners." She swiped her hand, expanding a star map. It showed Earth, but the continents were different, fused together. Pangaea. "They foresaw the rise of the aggressive species, my ancestors," Virelia explained, reading rapidly. "They knew war was coming, so they hid their potential. They took their own genetic code, stripped it of its active psionic markers, and seeded it into developing primates on 100 isolated worlds. Earth was one of them." Jack stared at the hologram. "So, humans aren't just some random evolutionary accident?" "No," Virelia said, turning to him. Tears stood in her eyes. "You are the contingency plan. You are the Ark. The royal family has spent millennia hunting down these seeded worlds, enslaving or destroying them, to ensure the Scion race could never rise again. They call us primitive to justify the purge. But you are the originals." A red warning glyph pulsed in the center of the room. A synthetic voice, deep and resonant, spoke in a language Jack didn't know, but somehow understood perfectly. "Warning, air detected, awakening protocols initiated, galactic signal ready." Virelia looked at the translation on her datapad. Her face paled. "Jack," she said, "the system says that if a verified heir, that is you, activates the full network, it will send a wake-up call to every dormant carrier in the galaxy. It won't just send data. It will trigger a mass genetic awakening." "Awakening?" "Telepathy," she said. "Latent powers. If you turn this on, you won't just expose the Empire. You will create an army of millions of scions on 100 worlds. It would be chaos. It would be war. Jack looked at the tower. The weight of it crushed down on him. He was just an engineer. He fixed things. He didn't start galactic revolutions. I didn't sign up for this, he whispered. I just wanted to fix solar panels and drink beer. I know, Virelia said softly, stepping close to him. But destiny is rarely a choice, my love. It is just the moment when... Crack. The sound was sharp, distinct, and out of place. It wasn't the tower. It wasn't the magma. Jack reacted on instinct. He tackled Virelia, slamming her to the hard stone of the bridge just as a bolt of searing red plasma sizzled through the space where her head had been. Down! Jack screamed. From the darkness of the tunnel entrance they had just used, figures emerged. They were not the clumsy foot soldiers of the local garrison. These were shadows encased in matte black armor, their helmets faceless glass ovals. They moved with terrifying silence. Royal enforcers, Virelia hissed, scrambling behind a protrusion of obsidian rock. The Razor team found us. They tracked the activation spike, Jack gritted out, pulling his kinetic pistol. How many? I count 6, maybe more in the tunnel. Another volley of plasma fire erupted, chewing up the stone around their cover. The heat was intense, singing the hair on Jack's arms. We need to get to the control console on the other side of the tower, Virelia yelled over the roar of fire. I can override the lockdown, but I need time. Go, Jack yelled, popping up to fire 3 rapid shots. His kinetic rounds sparked harmlessly off the heavy armor of the lead enforcer, but the impact was enough to make the soldier stumble. I'll draw their fire. Jack, no! Go! Jack broke cover. Sprinting to the right, away from the console, he fired wildly, shouting, Over here, you tin can bastards! The enforcers turned in unison, their red visors tracking him. The air filled with the screech of plasma discharge. Jack dove behind a stalagmite just as the rock exploded into molten slag behind him. He rolled, came up on one knee, and aimed for the joint in the lead enforcer's armor, the neck seal. He squeezed the trigger. The round hit true. The enforcer jerked, clutching his throat as the seal ruptured, spraying pressurized gas. He went down. One down, Jack yelled, adrenaline screaming in his veins. 5 to go. But they were advancing. They moved with a synchronized, predatory efficiency. 2 provided suppressing fire, pinning Jack down, while 3 others moved to flank him. They ignored Virelia, who was frantically typing on the holographic console 30 feet away. Accessing the main array. Virelia's voice was tight with panic. Decryption at 40%. A grenade landed near Jack's cover. It wasn't explosive, it was a sonic pulse charge. It detonated with a sound that wasn't a sound, it was a hammer to the brain. Jack screamed, dropping his gun and clutching his ears. His vision swam. The world tilted sideways. Blood ran from his nose. He stumbled out from behind the rock, disoriented, unable to stand. The enforcers stopped firing. They didn't need to shoot him now. The leader, a massive figure with officer markings on his chest, stepped forward. He raised a heavy plasma rifle, aiming directly at Jack's chest. Target acquired! The enforcer's amplified voice boomed. Termination authorized. Jack! Virelia screamed. Jack looked up. He saw the red glow of the barrel. He saw the end. He thought, absurdly, of the duck-print boxers he had worn the day they met. He didn't see the shot. Virelia moved. She didn't run. She didn't jump. She simply ceased to be where she was and appeared between Jack and the gun. But she wasn't just Virelia anymore. The fear that had paralyzed her, the shame of her clone heritage, the terror of the Empire, it all vanished, replaced by a singular white-hot need to protect the man bleeding on the floor. The Scion Tower hummed, responding to her intent, feeding her rage. She threw her hand out. No! The scream wasn't just vocal when it was a psychic shockwave. The air in the cavern turned violet, not a soft glow, but a violent, tearing rift in reality. The plasma bolt left the rifle and hit an invisible wall of force inches from Virelia's palm. The energy didn't dissipate, it reflected. But Virelia didn't stop there. She grabbed the energy of the cavern, the ancient power stored in the tower, the resonance of Jack's blood, the raw fury of a woman pushed too far, and she pulled. Her skin went translucent, revealing veins that flowed with liquid starlight. Her eyes became solid white orbs. "Burn," she whispered. A wave of purple fire erupted from her body. It wasn't fire that burned oxygen, it was energy that unmade matter. It washed over the bridge. The enforcers didn't have time to scream. The heavy black armor, the advanced shielding, the flesh beneath, it all simply dissolved. They were atomized in a heartbeat, turned into drifting clouds of metallic dust. The explosion of power rocked the cavern. The bridge cracked. Stalactites fell from the ceiling, splashing into the magma below. Jack, shielded by the shadow of her body, felt the heat pass over him, singing his clothes but leaving his skin untouched. He watched, vision blurring, as the woman he loved turned into a goddess of destruction. Then, the light died. Virelia collapsed. The silence that followed was deafening. Jack shook his head, trying to clear the sonic ringing. He crawled forward, his limbs feeling like lead. V. She was lying on the stone, her coveralls smoking. Her skin was gray, the bioluminescence completely extinguished. She looked small again. Broken. Jack reached her. He pulled her into his lap, checking for a pulse. It was there, thready, weak, fluttering like a dying moth. "Come on," he rasped, coughing up dust. "Don't you do this. You don't get to play hero, that's my job." He looked around. The enforcers were gone. The tunnel was blocked by fallen debris. The only way out was the ventilation shaft near the control console. He couldn't carry her and fight, but there was no one left to fight. He scooped her up. She was terrifyingly light. He staggered toward the console, his own body screaming in protest. His ears were ringing. His ribs felt cracked from the sonic blast, but he didn't stop. He laid her down next to the glowing hologram. He ripped a piece of his shirt off and dabbed at a cut on her forehead. "Wake up," he begged. "Please, V. Wake up." Her eyelids fluttered. A groan escaped her lips. Jack slumped back against the console, letting out a breath that was half sob. Oh, thank God. Virelia's eyes opened. They weren't white anymore. They were that familiar, beautiful violet. She looked at him, blinking through the haze. She reached up, her fingers trembling, and touched his face. "Jack," she whispered. Her voice was a wreck. "I'm here," he said, grabbing her hand and pressing it to his cheek. "I'm here. You vaporized them. V, you went full supernova. I thought," she coughed, wincing, "I thought I lost you." "Not that easy," Jack said, leaning down. She pulled him close. Their lips met, and it wasn't like the kiss in the cave. This tasted of copper blood, of dust, of salt tears. It was desperate and messy and terrified. It was an affirmation of life in the center of a tomb. Jack pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. "We are alive, but we are trapped." The tunnel collapsed. Virelia tried to sit up, groaning as she leaned against the obsidian pillar. She looked at the hologram. The warning glyph was still pulsing. Galactic signal ready. Awaiting input. "We have to send it," she said. Her voice was stronger now, hardened by the fire she had just channeled. Jack looked at the console. "If we send that signal, V, there is no going back. The Empire won't just hunt us. They will hunt the whole planet. They will come with fleets. They are coming anyway, she said. She pulled herself up, using the console for support. She looked at Jack. The enforcers were just the beginning. My father knows now. He knows what you are. He knows what we are. If we do nothing, they will scrub Earth to hide their secret. They will kill everyone you know. She pointed at the floating data streams. But if we send this, we expose the lie. We show the galaxy that the royal family are not gods. They are jailers. And we show the people that they have the power to break the bars. Jack looked at the red button, or the holographic equivalent of it. He thought about his trailer. He thought about the solar panels. He thought about the silence of the desert he loved. All of that is gone now. He looked at Virelia. She was bruised, bleeding, an enemy of her own state, and she had never looked more beautiful. Okay, Jack said. Let's burn it down. He stood up and took his place beside her. Together? He asked. Together, she said. Jack placed his hand on the panel. Virelia placed hers over his. They pushed. The singing tower screamed. It wasn't a sound of pain. It was a broadcast. A beam of pure psionic energy shot straight up, punching through 3 miles of rock, magma, and sand. It erupted from the desert floor like a spear of light, piercing the atmosphere and hitting the relay satellites in orbit. In seconds, the data packet was moving faster than light. It hit the subspace buoys. It hit the trade routes. It hit the private channels of every datapad, every ship computer, every news feed from the core worlds to the outer rim. The truth, the history of the scions, the seeding of the humans, the corruption of the third house, the video logs of Virelia and Jack, the footage of the enforcers trying to execute them. It was all out. The tower's light died down, its energy spent. The console went dark. Virelia slumped against the obsidian, exhaling a long, shaky breath. It is done. Jack looked at his datapad. It was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Alert. Priority 1 bounty issued. Target, Jack Rivers, dead or alive. Reward, 50 million credits. Alert. High Princess Virelia declared traitor to the crown. Stripped of rank. Sentenced to death in absentia. Well, Jack said, reading the scrolling text. 50 million. I'm finally worth something. He looked at Virelia. She was staring at nothing, her hand reaching up to touch the long, intricate braid of silver hair that hung over her shoulder. It was the symbol of her station, the mark of a high princess. It took 3 hours for handmaidens to weave it every morning. V? Jack asked. Virelia reached into her boot and pulled out a small, serrated survival knife she had taken from Jack's kit. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the braid near the root. My name, she said, her voice low and fierce, is Virelia. Just Virelia. Snip. The silver hair fell to the dusty floor of the cavern. She stood up, her hair now a jagged, shoulder-length crop that framed her face wildly. She looked dangerous. She looked free. She sheathed the knife and looked at Jack. We need to move, she said. Every bounty hunter in the sector just got our coordinates. Jack grinned. Despite the pain in his ribs, he offered her his hand. Lead the way, partner. The rendezvous point was a scrapyard in the mesosphere. It was a graveyard of orbital debris, a swirling ring of dead satellites and booster rockets that the cleanup crews of the Galactic Accord had forgotten about 2 centuries ago. Jack Rivers steered the stolen scout skiff with white-knuckled precision, dodging a rusted hull the size of a football field. The skiff's engine was screaming, the temperature gauge buried in the red. Beside him, Virelia was scanning the chaotic radar, her jaggedly cut silver hair floating in the microgravity that leaked through the skiff's damaged shielding. There, she pointed. Behind the fuel tanker wreckage. Signal code, Blue Drift. Jack swung the skiff around the twisting metal of a shattered solar wing. Hovering in the shadow of the debris was a ship that looked like it had been built out of spare parts and a bad attitude. It was asymmetrical, bulging with oversized engines, and painted a matte gray that absorbed the starlight. "That is your ride?" Jack asked, firing the braking thrusters. "I have seen lawnmowers with better structural integrity." "It is the Void Runner," Virelia said, tapping a sequence into her comms. "And it is the fastest blockade runner in the sector. Captain Xylus owes me a life debt. I got him off a penal colony on Xandar Prime by pointing out a syntax error in his sentencing documents." "A syntax error," Jack muttered, lining up with the cargo bay doors that were slowly yawning open. "Remind me to never argue with you about paperwork." They slammed onto the deck of the docking bay just as the proximity alarms on the skiff began to wail. A massive Razor-class interceptor had just cleared the horizon of Earth below, its scanners sweeping the junk belt. The cargo bay doors hissed shut, sealing them in darkness. The atmosphere flooded the room with a hiss. Jack slumped over the console, his adrenaline crashing hard. He felt a phantom sensation in the back of his skull, a sharp, icy prickle of cold. He looked at Virelia. She wasn't looking at him, but her hands were shaking. He is scared, Jack thought. He blinked. He hadn't thought that. The voice in his head sounded like his, but the emotion wasn't his. It was a raw, jagged spike of terror that tasted like copper on his tongue. "V?" he asked. "They are scanning the debris field," she whispered. "If they detect our thermal signature." "They won't," a booming voice echoed from the gantry above. Jack looked up. Standing on the catwalk was a creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a lobster, wearing a leather flight jacket. He, or it, was massive, with chitinous plates covering his torso and fur on his limbs. He held a cigar in one clawed hand. "Captain Xylus," Virelia said, stepping off the skiff with a regal grace that the mechanic's coveralls couldn't hide. "Your shielding is adequate?" "Adequate?" The captain descended the ladder, the metal groaning under his weight. "Princess, I have contraband shielding from the outer rim. I could fly through a star and they would just think I was a sunspot. Welcome aboard. You look terrible." "Thank you, Xylus," she said, allowing him to clasp her forearm in a greeting that looked like it could crush bone. "This is Jack Rivers. He is with me." Xylus turned 4 black bead-like eyes onto Jack. "The human. The one with the 50 million credit price tag. You are a very expensive piece of cargo, little mammal." "I try to keep my value up," Jack said, standing and offering a hand. He tried not to wince at the pain in his ribs. "Thanks for the lift," Xylus laughed, a sound like rocks grinding in a blender. "Don't thank me yet. We have to clear the gravity well before the blockade establishes a net. Get to the mess hall. Strap in. It is going to get bumpy." The escape was less of a flight and more of a violent ejection from reality. The Void Runner didn't accelerate. It punched a hole in space and fell through it. Jack spent the first hour gripping the edge of a bolted-down table, trying to convince his stomach that it was still inside his body. By the time the ship stabilized into the smooth hum of faster-than-light travel, Earth was gone, a blue marble lost in the black. Jack stood at the viewport in the mess hall, staring at the streak of stars. He felt a profound, hollow ache in his chest. He was a fugitive. He was homeless. He was traveling at light speed with an alien princess and a lobster bear. "It is beautiful, is it not?" Jack turned. A crew member was leaning against the doorframe. She was humanoid, with skin the color of a summer sky, bright, vibrant blue. 2 long, fleshy tails drifted from the back of her head, twitching like a cat's tail. She wore a flight suit unzipped to a suggestive degree, revealing intricate white tattoos that swirled over her collarbone. "There are a lot of stars," Jack said. "I'm Rixie," she said, sauntering over. She moved with a fluid, predatory grace. She looked Jack up and down, her eyes lingering on his broad shoulders and the grease smudges on his arms. "I've never seen a human up close. You're sturdier than the database says. Good bone density." She reached out, a finger tracing the muscle of his bicep. Her skin was warm and dry. "I drink a lot of milk," Jack said, stepping back slightly. "It does a body good," Rixie grinned, stepping into his space. "I bet it does. You know, the thermal couplings in the engine room are overheating. I could use a strong pair of hands to help me adjust the valves." "He is busy," a voice cut through the air like a diamond cutter. Virelia stood in the doorway. She had showered in the communal sonic unit and changed into spare clothes Xylus had provided, a loose gray tunic and trousers that were too big for her. But she wore them like royal raiment. Her violet eyes were narrowing. The air in the room suddenly felt heavier, charged with static. Rixie looked at Virelia, then back at Jack, a smirk playing on her lips. "Just being friendly. Your Highness. Or is it Ex-Highness now? I heard the broadcast." "My title is irrelevant," Virelia said, walking forward. She didn't stomp, but her footsteps seemed to echo with unnecessary weight. "What is relevant is that this passenger is under my protection, and his schedule is currently full." Rixie laughed, threw a wink at Jack, and backed away. "All right, calm down, glowworm. If you get bored of diplomacy, human, you know where the engine room is." She sauntered out. Jack looked at Virelia. She was glaring at the empty doorway, her hands balled into fists. A faint, erratic pulse of light was throbbing at her temples. "Glowworm?" Jack asked, trying to suppress a smile. "She is crude," Virelia snapped, "and her biological pheromones are unregulated. She was attempting to initiate a mating ritual. I think she just wanted help with the valves. I know what valves she wanted help with." Virelia spun on him, her eyes flashing. "Do not be naive, Jack. That species is known for their promiscuity and their flexible morality regarding relationships." Jack leaned against the table, crossing his arms. The ache of losing Earth was receding, replaced by a warmth that spread through his chest. "Are you jealous?" "I am not jealous," she huffed, crossing her arms to match him. "I am territorial. There is a difference. Jealousy is an insecurity. Territoriality is a statement of ownership." "Ownership?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "So I'm property now?" Virelia froze. The anger drained out of her face, replaced by a sudden flush of purple on her cheeks. She looked down. That came out wrong. I did not mean ownership in the chattel sense. I meant..." She looked up, her eyes vulnerable. "I meant that we just blew up my life. Jack, we are running from the entire galaxy. You are the only thing I have. If I lose you to a blue mechanic with wandering hands..." Jack pushed off the table and closed the distance between them. He reached out, tucking a strand of her jaggedly cut hair behind her ear. "You aren't going to lose me," he said softly. "Not to Rixie, not to the Empire. You're stuck with me, princess." Virelia leaned into his touch. Jack felt it again, that ghost sensation. A wash of relief that felt like warm water, flowing from her mind into his. It was so clear, so tangible. He almost gasped. "You feel that?" he whispered. "Feel what?" "Your relief," he said. "It feels like vanilla and rain." Virelia looked at him, her eyes widening. "You are projecting sensory metaphors. Jack, your telepathy. It is not just receiving. You are starting to interpret. Is that good? It means the bond is settling, she said. It means we are becoming one. Xylus, for all his gruffness, had a soft spot for luxury. The captain's quarters had a legitimate, water-based hydration tub, a rarity in space where sonic showers were the norm to save weight. He had offered it to them with a grunt and a warning not to use all the hot water. 2 hours later, Jack and Varelia were squeezed into the tub. The water was hot, steaming, and smelled faintly of lavender salt Xylus must have looted from a luxury liner. Jack sat with his back against the metal rim, and Varelia sat between his legs, her back resting against his chest. The water covered them to the shoulders, the grime of the caves, the sweat of the flight, the blood from the skirmish. It was all washing away. Jack took a sponge and slowly washed her arms. She was covered in bruises, mottled purple marks that looked dark against her violet skin. "Does this hurt?" he asked, tracing a bruise on her shoulder. "No," she murmured, her eyes closed, head tipping back onto his shoulder. "It aches, but it is a good ache. It reminds me I survived." She picked up his hand, her fingers lacing with his. She brought his hand to her lips, kissing his knuckles, then the rough skin of his palm where the tower had burned him. "You have scars," she whispered, tracing an old white line on his forearm. "From before me." "That one is from a wrench that slipped when I was 20, Jack said. "That one is from a bar fight in Albuquerque. That one." He pointed to a jagged mark on his thumb. "That was a can of soup that fought back." Varelia chuckled, the vibration humming against his chest. "You are a warrior of many battles, Jack Rivers." "And you," Jack said, dipping the sponge in the water and squeezing it over her neck. "You cut your hair." Varelia reached up, touching the jagged ends. It was heavy. The braid, it represented the weight of the dynasty. Every loop was a law I had to follow. Every ribbon was an expectation. She turned in the water, straddling his lap so she could face him. The water sloshed gently. Her skin was slick and glowing with a soft, steady light that illuminated the steam rising around them. "I feel lighter," she said, "but I also feel untethered. Who am I, Jack, if I am not the princess?" "You are the woman who saved my life," Jack said, looking into her eyes. "You are the woman who likes old movies and hates spicy food. You are Varelia." She looked at him, her gaze intense. "I want to show you something. A custom of my people, not the royals, the scholars, the artists." She lifted her hands, placing her fingertips lightly against his temples. "It is called the Kavaks," she whispered. "The dance of minds. We usually do it standing, but here works. What do I do?" "Nothing," she said. "Just open. Don't hide anything. Don't protect your thoughts." She closed her eyes. Jack did the same. At first, there was just the darkness of his own eyelids. Then, a spark. A flash of violet light that wasn't seeing, but feeling. He felt a sensation like falling, then catching an updraft. He wasn't in the tub anymore. He was floating in a sea of pure emotion. He felt her gratitude, warm and golden. He felt her fear, sharp, cold spikes that dissolved as soon as they touched him. He felt her desire, a deep, thrumming bass note that resonated in his bones. It wasn't just reading her mind. It was a conversation without words. She guided him, pushing a memory of the desert sunrise toward him. He caught it, adding his own memory of the first time he saw her float down from the sky. The memories swirled together, creating a new image, a sunrise where she was the sun. In the physical world, her hips moved slowly against his. In the mental world, they were spinning, orbiting each other like binary stars. Jack gasped, his eyes flying open. The intimacy was overwhelming. It was more intense than sex. It was total exposure. "Don't pull back," she whispered, her forehead resting against his. "Stay with me." "I'm here," he managed to choke out. The water cooled around them, but the heat between them spiked. They moved together, the friction of skin on skin amplified by the psychic link. Every touch was a lightning strike. When he kissed her, he didn't just taste her mouth, he tasted her joy. When she arched against him, he didn't just feel her body, he felt her soul expanding, wrapping around his, holding him in a grip that death itself couldn't break. It was a union in zero gravity. Even though they were bound by the ship's artificial pull, they were weightless, timeless. When it was over, they lay in the cooling water, breathless, their hearts beating in a perfectly synchronized rhythm. Jack felt a tear slide down his cheek. He wasn't sad. He was just full. "Okay," he whispered, his voice cracking. "That beats the movies." While Jack and Varelia drifted in the quiet of the Void Runner, the galaxy was burning. On Capital Prime, a world of chrome spires and artificial rings, the Empress Satine sat on the Sun throne. The transmission from Earth had played on every screen in the city before the sensors could scramble it. The silence in the throne room was absolute. "The tower," the Empress said. Her voice was like grinding glass. She was beautiful, terrifyingly so, with the same violet eyes as her daughter, but hard and cold as gemstones. She activated the singing tower. "The population is unrestful. Your radiance," a general in golden armor said, bowing low. "Riots in the lower districts. They are calling her the Truth-bringer." "She is a traitor," the Empress hissed. She stood, her robes sweeping the floor. "She has bonded with the Scion beast. She threatens the purity of the Accord." A chime sounded from her console, a secure channel. "Leave us," she commanded. The court cleared instantly. The Empress activated the channel. A hologram of a young man appeared. He looked like Varelia, but younger, softer. Prince Aris. "Mother," he said, bowing stiffly. "You have deployed the fleet?" she asked. "Yes," Aris lied. His face was a mask of obedience, but his hands, hidden below the frame of the hologram, were clenched. "We are tracking their vector." "Good. Bring me her head, Aris, and bring me the human alive. I want to see what makes him so special before I peel him apart." The transmission cut. Aris stared at the blank space where his mother had been. He turned to his own console, encrypting a burst transmission on a smuggler's frequency. "Varelia. Run. The trial has been declared. It is not a court-martial. It is a public execution order. They know you are heading for the nebula. Do not go to the safe house. Go to Sanctum. The resistance is real, and they are waiting." Jack woke up screaming, not loudly. A strangled gasp that woke Varelia instantly. They were in the narrow bunk of their cabin, limbs tangled together. "Jack?" She was hovering over him instantly, her hand on his chest. "What is it, the nightmares?" "No!" Jack gasped, clutching his head. "Not a nightmare, a voice, loud, clear." He looked at her, his eyes wide. "Your brother," Jack said. "Aris, he shouted in my head." Varelia went still. "Aris, that is impossible. He is not a Scion. He has no telepathy." "He doesn't," Jack said, rubbing his temples. "But I do. I heard him projecting. He was terrified. He was thinking about you." "What did he say?" "He said, 'Run.'" Jack focused, pulling the threads of the memory. "He said the trial is lethal. He said go to Sanctum." Varelia slumped back against the bulkhead. Sanctum, the rogue planet. It is a legend, a ghost world in the Horsehead Nebula where the sun never rises. He said the resistance is waiting, Jack added. Virelia looked at the ceiling. Eris, my little brother. He is risking his life to warn us. She looked at Jack. If you heard him across light years, your power is growing faster than the records predicted. You are acting as a receiver for extreme emotional states. Great, Jack muttered. I'm a galactic mood ring. You are a beacon, she corrected. Sanctum was a nightmare of navigation. It was a planet that didn't orbit a star. It drifted alone in the dense, colorful gas of a nebula. It was dark, cold, and shrouded in perpetual twilight. The Void Runner shuddered as it broke through the atmospheric storms. I hate this rock, Xylus grumbled from the pilot's seat. Sensors are useless, flying by eye. Hope you trust your brother, Princess. I do, she said. They broke through the cloud layer. Below them, jagged mountains of black ice rose up like teeth, but in the valleys there were lights, thousands of them. Bioluminescent fungi forests, glowing blue and green, and amidst them the harsh yellow flicker of campfires and fusion generators. Look, Jack said, pointing. A landing grid had been cleared in the valley, and around it, people. Not an army, a mob, a refugee camp of a dozen different species. The ship touched down with a heavy thud. The ramp lowered. Jack and Virelia walked out into the freezing air. Jack wore a heavy coat Xylus had lent him. Virelia stood in her simple tunic, the cold seemingly not bothering her anymore. Her internal fire was keeping her warm. As they walked down the ramp, the crowd surged forward. There were humans, descendants of other seeded worlds. There were aliens with 4 arms, aliens with scales, aliens made of rock. They were dirty, tired, and armed with scavenged weapons. But when they saw Virelia, they went silent. Then, they saw Jack. A ripple went through the crowd, a whisper, the scion, the air. A massive reptilian alien stepped forward. He carried a heavy plasma repeater. He looked at Virelia, then at Jack. We saw the broadcast, the alien rumbled. We saw the fire in the tunnel. Is it true? Does the human carry the spark? Jack looked at the sea of faces. They looked at him with a hunger that terrified him. They didn't want an engineer. They wanted a messiah. He stepped forward. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't a speaker. I don't know about sparks, Jack said, his voice projecting clearly in the thin air. I'm just a guy who got tired of being told who I was allowed to love. He reached out and took Virelia's hand. He lifted it high. And I'm tired of people telling me my planet doesn't matter. We aren't primitive. We aren't cattle. We are here. A cheer went up. It started low, then built into a roar that echoed off the ice mountains. Virelia stepped forward. She looked at the crowd. She saw the ragged banners of the Accord, defaced. She saw the hope in their eyes. She released Jack's hand and reached for her neck. She undid the heavy silver clasp that held her house crest, the 3-headed serpent. She held it up. The crowd went silent again. I was born High Princess Virelia of the 3rd house, she cried out, her voice ringing like a bell. I was raised to believe that order was more important than life. I was taught that you were beneath me. She threw the silver crest onto the frozen ground. I was wrong. She ignited her bioluminescence. She flared bright, a beacon of violet light in the dark valley. There is no 3rd house here, she shouted. There are no royals. There are only those who fight and those who bow. I will not bow. I am a citizen of the stars, and I stand with him. She pointed at Jack. And I stand with you. The roar that followed shook the snow from the cliffs. It was the sound of a rebellion finding its voice. Later that night, The celebration had quieted. The resistance fighters sat around fires, planning, sharing food, cleaning weapons. Jack and Varelia sat on a ridge overlooking the camp. The sky above was a swirl of purple and red nebula gases. A massive moon, cracked and broken by some ancient cataclysm, hung low on the horizon. It was freezing, but they sat close, wrapped in the same heavy blanket. "You gave a hell of a speech," Jack said quietly. "I improvised," Varelia said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I was terrified. Couldn't tell." "I could," she said. "I was shaking." "Well," Jack said, wrapping his arm tighter around her, "you fooled them. You looked like a queen." "No," she corrected. "I looked like a free woman." They sat in silence for a long time, watching the alien moon. The reality of their situation was heavy. They were leading a war now. There would be battles. There would be death. The Empress was coming. But for this moment, they were just two people on a rock in the middle of nowhere. Varelia turned her head, looking up at him. Her violet eyes reflected the nebula. "Jack?" "Yeah?" "One last time," she whispered. "For the record, what do you like most?" "Human." Jack looked at her. He thought about the first time he saw her. He thought about her butt. He thought about the way she glowed when she was happy. He thought about the way she had stood between him and a plasma rifle. He smiled, a slow, tired, genuine smile. "The fact that you stayed," he said softly. Varelia smiled back, tears shining in her eyes. She leaned up and kissed him. It was a kiss of promise, a kiss of war, a kiss of forever. "I am not going anywhere," she whispered against his lips. Above them, the nebula swirled, and the galaxy held its breath. The war had begun, but so had something much stronger. The shuttle descent into Capital Prime was nothing like the rough, rattling re-entry of the smuggler's ship. It was smooth, silent, and terrifyingly civilized. The city below was a sprawling geometric miracle of white marble and gold alloy, a monument to 1,000 years of uninterrupted rule. It looked beautiful. It looked like a graveyard waiting for a fresh corpse. Jack Rivers tugged at the collar of his diplomatic robes. They were heavy, made of stiff iridescent fabric that itched in places he didn't know could itch. "Stop fidgeting," Varelia whispered. She was standing beside him in the shuttle's passenger bay, staring out the viewport at the approaching Grand Spire. She wore a veil of heavy lace that obscured her face, and her jaggedly cut hair was hidden beneath a ceremonial hood. "You look like a nervous spice merchant." "I feel like a nervous spice merchant," Jack muttered. "I feel like a nervous spice merchant who is about to walk into a lion's den wearing a staked necklace." He looked at her. Even under the heavy layers of the disguise, he could feel the tension radiating off her. It wasn't the shivering fear of the caves, it was a cold, crystalline resolve. She was a diamond about to cut glass. "We have one chance," she said, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. "The tribunal begins in 1 hour. The Empress will be there, the High Council, the cameras, and the guards," Jack added. "Don't forget the 5,000 guys with plasma spears." "They are irrelevant," Varelia said. "If we fail to upload the data, we die. If we succeed, the truth becomes the weapon." The shuttle docked with a soft thud. The airlock cycled. Jack reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. He squeezed them, sending a pulse of warmth through the psychic link that had been humming between them for weeks. It was stronger now, a constant background noise of shared emotion. He could feel her heartbeat in his own chest. "Hey," he said softly. She turned to him, the veil shifting. "If this goes south," Jack said, his voice serious, If I don't make it to the exit, do not speak of termination, she hissed. If I die, Jack pressed, gripping her hand tighter. Make it count. Don't let me be just another grease stain on the pavement. Make sure they hear us. Virelia went still. She stepped closer, pressing her veiled forehead against his. If you die, Jack Rivers, she whispered, her voice fierce and trembling, I will burn this city until there is nothing left but ash. But we are not dying today. The doors hissed open. Showtime, Jack said. The grand hall of the tribunal was a space designed to make humans feel like insects. The ceiling was half a mile high, supported by pillars that looked like weeping giants carved from obsidian. The floor was a mirror of polished black stone. Thousands of delegates filled the tiered seating that lined the walls, ambassadors, generals, planetary governors. The air smelled of expensive incense and fear. Jack and Virelia, disguised as envoys from the Outer Rim Trade Coalition, walked down the long central aisle. It felt like walking a plank. Jack's mind was a cacophony. The Scion gene, fully active now after his exposure to the Singing Tower and his bond with Virelia, was picking up stray thoughts from the crowd. It was a roar of whispers. Is the rumor true? Treason. The Empress looks angry. Execute the brother. He gritted his teeth, building the mental wall Virelia had taught him. Focus. Just walk. At the far end of the hall, atop a dais of floating gravity platforms, sat the Empress Satine. She was terrifying. She wore armor of white gold and a cape that flowed like liquid blood. Her face was a mask of ageless cruelty, her violet eyes scanning the room with boredom. Beside her, in chains, knelt Prince Aris. He looked beaten, his face bruised, but his head was up. Bring the accused, the Empress commanded. Her voice was amplified, booming through the hall without a microphone. The crowd hushed. They weren't bringing Virelia. They were bringing a hologram of her, a frozen image of her face from the bounty alerts. High Princess Virelia, the Empress intoned, charged with treason, charged with genetic heresy, charged with conspiring with a primitive species to destabilize the Accord. Jack felt Virelia stiffen beside him. The sentence, the Empress continued, standing up, is erased. Her name shall be struck from the archives, her lineage ended, and her co-conspirator, the human male, shall be hunted until his species is extinct. Objection! The voice rang out clear and sharp, cutting through the heavy atmosphere of the court. It wasn't a lawyer. It was the veiled envoy from the Outer Rim. The entire hall turned. The Empress froze, her eyes narrowing. Who dares interrupt the crown? She demanded. Virelia reached up. She grabbed the heavy lace veil. She ripped it off. She threw the hood back. Her jagged, short silver hair caught the light. Her violet eyes blazed. I do, she said. A gasp went through the crowd. It sounded like all the air being sucked out of the room. Virelia, the Empress whispered. Then she smiled, a shark-smelling blood. You foolish child. You walked right into the blade. I am not a child, Virelia announced, her voice projecting with a trained royal cadence. And I am not a princess of the third house. That house is a lie. Guards! The Empress screamed. Seize them! Kill them! The royal guard, 50 elite soldiers in gold armor, surged forward from the perimeter, lowering their plasma pikes. Now, Jack! Virelia yelled. Jack didn't reach for a gun. He reached for his mind. He closed his eyes and slammed down the mental barrier he had been holding up. He didn't just let his thoughts out, he pushed them. He grabbed the massive data packet they had downloaded from the Singing Tower. The history, the genocide, the truth of the human seeding, and he hooked it into the psychic resonance of the room. Every member of the court was wearing a neural link earpiece for translation. Jack hijacked the frequency. Look, the word wasn't spoken. It was a psychic command that hit 10,000 minds at once. The guards stumbled, clutching their helmets. The delegates screamed, grabbing their heads. Behind the Empress, the massive holographic display of the royal crest flickered, died, and was replaced. Images flooded the screen, ancient star charts, videos of the Cyan Purge, genetic diagrams showing the manipulation of the clone bloodlines. And finally, the footage from the cave, the enforcers firing on their own princess. "Lies!" the Empress shrieked, waving her hand. "Cut the feed! Kill them!" But the guards weren't moving. They were staring at the screen. They were staring at the truth. Jack opened his eyes. He stepped up beside Virelia. He felt the hum of the crowd shifting. The fear was turning into something else. Anger. "You see her," Virelia shouted, pointing at her mother. "She is not a goddess. She is a warden. She has kept you in the dark for 1,000 years because she is afraid. She is afraid of what you will become if you know the truth." Silence. The Empress pulled a disruptor pistol from her belt. She aimed it at Virelia. She fired. The bolt of red energy screamed across the dais. Jack didn't think. He didn't calculate. He just moved. He stepped in front of Virelia, raising his hand, instinctively trying to use the shield she had used in the cave. But he wasn't Virelia. He was human. The bolt hit his psychic shield, shattered it, and slammed into his chest. Jack was thrown backward as if hit by a truck. He hit the black stone floor hard, sliding 10 feet. The smell of ozone and burning flesh filled the air. "Jack!" Virelia screamed. The spell broke. The sight of the Empress firing on an unarmed man in the middle of the tribunal was the spark that lit the powder keg. "She is a murderer!" Prince Aris yelled, struggling against his chains. General Kyle, the commander of the Royal Guard, looked at the screen where the enforcers were shown massacring civilians. He looked at the Empress, who was leveling her gun for a second shot. "Enough!" the general roared. He didn't attack the intruders. He turned and tackled the Empress. Chaos erupted. The delegates were standing, shouting, some fighting each other. The guards were securing the exits, turning their weapons on the loyalists. Virelia saw none of it. She dropped to her knees beside Jack. He was lying on his back. His chest was a ruin of charred fabric and blood. His breathing was wet, ragged bubbles of sound. "Jack," she sobbed, her hands hovering over the wound. "Jack, look at me." He blinked. His eyes were hazy, unfocused. He coughed, blood coating his teeth. He wheezed, did we make it count?" "Yes," she cried, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the blood on his shirt. "Yes, you idiot. You made it count. Now stay with me." "Tired," Jack whispered. His skin was turning gray. The light in his eyes was fading fast. The connection in her mind, the warm, steady hum of his presence was flickering out. "No," Virelia whispered. "No!" She placed her hands directly onto the wound. "You do not get to leave," she snarled. "I forbid it." She closed her eyes and reached into the core of her being. She found the well of bioluminescent energy that sustained her, the fire that made her Cyan compatible, the life force of her clone biology. She didn't pull from the outside this time. She pushed. She poured everything she was into him. Her skin began to glow, blindingly bright, but instead of the violet fury of the cave, this was a soft, blinding white. It was pure life. "Take it," she commanded into his mind. "Take it all." Jack gasped, his back arching off the floor. The energy flooded his system, knitting bone, cauterizing arteries, jump-starting the failing rhythm of his heart. But as he healed, she faded. Her glow dimmed. Her skin turned translucent, then gray. The heat left her body. She was pouring her soul into a vessel that wasn't meant to hold it, and she was emptying herself to do it. V. Stop. Jack groaned, his voice stronger, but she didn't stop. She held on until the last spark was gone, until the wound was sealed, until his heart was beating a strong, steady rhythm against her palms. Then, the light went out. Virelia collapsed forward, falling limp across his chest. The great hall was silent. The fighting had stopped. The Empress was in irons. The galaxy had changed. But Jack Rivers didn't care. He sat up, screaming her name, clutching the lifeless body of the woman who had just traded her eternity for his tomorrow. The first thing Virelia felt was the wind. It wasn't the sterile, recycled air of a starship. It wasn't the dry, dusty heat of the Nevada desert. It was cool, moist, and smelled of chlorophyll and wet earth. She opened her eyes. She was lying on a bed, but not a hospital bed. It was wide, soft, and covered in white linens that smelled of sunshine. She turned her head. There were no metal walls. The room opened up onto a balcony that overlooked a valley so green it hurt her eyes. Waterfalls cascaded down distant cliffs, feeding a river that wound through a city built of glass and living trees. You've been asleep a long time. She froze. She knew that voice. She pushed herself up. Her body felt heavy, weak, but whole. She looked toward the balcony. Jack was sitting in a chair, his feet propped up on the railing. He was reading a datapad. He looked different. There was a patch of white hair at his temple that hadn't been there before, and a scar, pink and jagged, peeking out from the collar of his shirt. But he was there. Solid, real. Jack! Her voice was a croak. He dropped the datapad. He was at her side in a second, his hands gripping her shoulders, his eyes scanning her face with a desperation that broke her heart. Hey, he whispered. Hey, sleeping beauty. I thought... She touched his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart. I thought I died. You tried, Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. You burned out your entire biomatrix. The medics on Sanctum said you were an empty shell. They said you wouldn't wake up. How? The bond, Jack said, tapping his temple. You gave me your energy. I just gave some of it back. Keep talking to you, keep pulling you. It took a month, but you're stubborn. Virelia leaned into him, resting her forehead against his chest. She closed her eyes and checked the connection. It was there. It was different now. Quieter, deeper, like the roots of an old tree. Where are we? She asked. New Dawn, Jack said. One of the seeded worlds. The Resistance set up the interim government here. It's nice. No deserts, lots of waterfalls. And the Empress? In a cell, Jack said grimly. Awaiting trial. Your brother is running the council for now. He's repealing the isolation laws. The galaxy is a mess. There are riots, celebrations, confusion. But the war is over. Virelia looked out at the green valley. Peace. It was a concept she had studied, but never lived. So, she said softly. We are unemployed. Jack laughed. Not exactly. Eris wants us to be ambassadors. He thinks a human and an ex-princess might be good at bridging the gap. Diplomacy, she mused. I used to be good at that. We can try a new kind, Jack said. Less bowing, more honesty. And Earth? She asked. Safe, Jack said. The blockade is gone. We can go back whenever you want. Virelia looked at him. She looked at the life they had fought for. She looked at the man who had crossed the stars for her. I want to go home, she said. I want to see the desert. The Nevada desert hadn't changed. The rocks were still red, the heat was still oppressive, and the silence was still absolute. Jack's trailer was gone, blown apart by the Enforcer attack. But the land remained. They stood on the edge of the canyon where they had first watched the drone fall. It was early morning. The sky was bleeding from indigo to gold. Jack stood with his arm around Virelia's waist. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, earth clothes. Her hair had grown out slightly, a messy silver halo around her face. She looked healthy. She looked happy. They watched the sun crest the horizon, painting the desert on fire. "It is inefficient," Virelia noted, leaning her head on his shoulder. "The amount of energy this planet radiates, but, Jack prompted. "But it is beautiful," she admitted. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. The sunrise reflected in her violet eyes. "You know," she said, a playful smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You never really finished answering my question. From the first night," Jack raised an eyebrow. "Oh, which one?" "The important one," she said, stepping closer, her body pressing against his. "So, what do you like now?" "Human." Jack grinned. It wasn't the sarcastic grin of the engineer who met her in his boxers. It was the grin of a man who had seen the end of the world and decided he liked this one better. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough to bruise, tight enough to never let go. "Still your butt," Jack said, deadpan. Virelia rolled her eyes, laughing. "But also," Jack softened, his hand coming up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "Your heart." He kissed her as the sun rose over the desert, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy was quiet enough to listen.